In 2022, Poland signed one of the largest arms deals in European history. The buyer was not shopping in Washington or London or Paris. It went to Seoul.
Poland ordered 80 K2 Black Panther tanks, 212 K9 Thunder howitzers, 290 Chung-hee rocket launchers, and 48 FA-50 light attack jets. The total value was over $12 billion.
A country that most people associate with Samsung phones and K-pop had just become one of the biggest arms suppliers on the continent that invented modern warfare.
How did that happen? That is exactly what we are going to uncover today. This is History Lens. Let me take you back to the moment that started it all.
In July 1969, President Richard Nixon stood on the island of Guam and announced a new foreign policy doctrine. The message was blunt. The United States would honor its treaty commitments, but allies would have to handle their own conventional defense. American troops were not going to fight every ground war in Asia anymore. For South Korea, a country that had 60,000 American soldiers stationed on its soil and a hostile nuclear-armed neighbor across the border, this was not a policy shift, it was a threat. Nixon followed through fast. By 1971, the U.S. had withdrawn 20,000 troops from the Korean peninsula, cutting the force nearly in half. South Korean President Park Chung-hee watched this happen and made a calculation that would reshape his entire country. If America could leave at any time, Korea needed to build its own weapons, not eventually, now.
In 1973, Park launched the Heavy and Chemical Industry Drive, a massive government-led push to build steel mills, shipyards, petrochemical plants, and machine factories across the country. On the surface, it looked like an economic development plan, and it was.
But declassified documents revealed that the real engine behind the program was defense. Park wanted Korea to manufacture its own tanks, artillery, rifles, and ammunition, and to do that, he needed an industrial base that did not exist yet. What most people do not know is that Park went even further. In 1972, he secretly ordered a program called Project 890, which aimed to develop nuclear weapons. He instructed Korean scientists to build a bomb by 1977. The program got far enough to alarm the CIA, and in 1975, the United States pressured Park into canceling it by threatening to withdraw its nuclear umbrella entirely. Park gave up the bomb, but he never gave up on building a conventional arms industry. The nuclear scare actually made him more determined to develop everything else. The strategy was simple but disciplined. Korea would start by manufacturing American weapons under license. They would learn every step of the production process, train their own engineers, and then gradually design their own systems. The first major product was the K-1 main battle tank, developed in the 1980s with help from Chrysler Defense. It was based on the American M1 Abrams platform, but adapted for Korean terrain and requirements. By the time the K-1A1 variant rolled out in the late 1990s, Korean engineers had already started designing what would become the K-2 Black Panther, a fully indigenous next-generation tank. The same pattern repeated across every category. The K9 Thunder self-propelled howitzer started production in 1999 and has since become the most exported artillery system of the 21st century. The T-50 Golden Eagle advanced trainer jet, developed with Lockheed Martin, became a stepping stone to the KF-21 Borame, a 4.5 generation fighter that completed its flight test program in early 2026 and is expected to enter frontline service later that year. Each generation of weapons leaned on the last, and each one depended less on foreign components. But the weapons are only half the story. The real reason South Korea can deliver military hardware faster and cheaper than most Western competitors is its civilian manufacturing base. Korea built its modern economy by exporting manufactured goods into markets that punish delays and defects. Semiconductors are the country's largest export at $141.9 billion in 2024. Building chips requires precision measured in nanometers, which is 100,000th of a millimeter, and doing that at industrial scale demands a level of process control that very few nations have mastered. That same discipline shows up in shipbuilding. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, South Korea held 28.2% of global shipbuilding output in 2023, behind only China. Korean shipyards build some of the most complex vessels on the planet, including LNG carriers with cryogenic containment systems that operate at -163 degrees Celsius. Managing a shipyard means coordinating thousands of parts, hundreds of subcontractors, and a workforce that has to execute the same process identically every single time. That is the same skill set you need to build tanks, warships, and rocket launchers. Then there is automation. South Korea has the highest industrial robot density in the world, with 1,012 robots per 10,000 manufacturing workers, according to the International Federation of Robotics. The global average is 162. That means Korean factories can scale production faster and maintain tighter quality control than almost anyone else. When a country like Poland suddenly needs 212 howitzers delivered in 2 years instead of 10, that kind of infrastructure is not something you can improvise. You either have it or you do not. The shift in global demand is what turned all of this latent capacity into actual export contracts. Before 2022, most European militaries had been shrinking their inventories for 2 decades. Stockpiles were thin, maintenance budgets were cut, and the assumption was that large-scale conventional war in Europe was a thing of the past. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine destroyed that assumption overnight.
European buyers suddenly needed equipment fast and in volume. The U.S. defense industry could deliver some of it, but American production lines were already stretched across their own military commitments and other allied orders.
European manufacturers had hollowed out much of their capacity during the post-Cold War peace dividend. The backlog for a German Leopard 2 tank or a French Caesar howitzer could stretch years into the future. South Korea had the capacity right now. When Poland needed howitzers immediately, Hanwha shipped the first batch of K9 Thunders directly from Korean production lines, while simultaneously setting up a factory in Poland to build more locally. Poland received all 212 K9 howitzers by late 2025. That kind of speed is what separates a brochure from a real defense partner. The K9 Thunder has now been exported to at least 11 countries, including Turkey, Poland, Finland, India, Norway, Estonia, Australia, Egypt, Romania, and most recently Vietnam. Over 1,900 units have been built since 1998. The platform keeps winning contracts because it does the one thing modern artillery needs to do above all else. It fires a burst of 3 rounds in 15 seconds and then moves before counter-battery fire arrives. In Ukraine, return fire has been documented arriving in as little as 3 minutes. Mobility is no longer optional. It is survival.
The K2 Black Panther is following a similar trajectory. Poland signed for 180 units in August 2025, with 64 of them to be manufactured in Poland itself.
The K2 carries the same Rheinmetall 120mm L55 smoothbore gun found on the German Leopard 2A6, combined with a Korean-designed autoloader that reduces the crew to 3. Its hydro-pneumatic suspension can tilt the hull to fire from defilade positions, and the fire control system incorporates millimeter-wave radar for target acquisition. For a country staring across a border at Russian forces, these are not theoretical advantages. Then there is the Redback infantry fighting vehicle. In December 2023, Australia signed a $7 billion contract with Hanwha Defence Australia for 129 locally built Redback IFVs after a competition that lasted years. The Redback carries a crew of 3 plus 6 dismounts, mounts a 30mm Bushmaster chain gun, and can fire Spike anti-tank guided missiles. Winning this contract was about more than hardware. Australia needed a partner that could run a disciplined industrial program inside a foreign country under local political constraints and then support it for decades. Hanwha proved it could. The Chunmoo multiple launch rocket system rounds out the ground portfolio. Comparable to the American HIMARS, the Chunmoo carries 6 guided rockets and has been ordered by Poland, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Estonia, and Norway. Poland alone has 290 units on order, most of which will be manufactured domestically. The pattern is consistent across every platform. Deliver fast from Korean lines first, then transfer production to the buyer's country to lock in a long-term relationship. On the naval side, the story connects directly to the United States. The U.S. Navy does not have a shortage of strategy, it has a shortage of dry dock space. American public shipyards are modernizing under a long-term infrastructure program, but the Government Accountability Office has flagged repeated delays in developing full cost and schedule estimates. In the meantime, ships that need maintenance are waiting in line.
South Korea stepped into that gap. In March 2025, the USNS Wally Shira completed a 7-month regular overhaul at Hanwha Ocean in South Korea, marking the first time a Korean shipyard had completed a major U.S. Navy repair contract.
In August 2025, HD Hyundai Heavy Industries won a maintenance and repair contract for another U.S. Navy auxiliary ship, and in December 2024, Hanwha completed a $100 million acquisition of Philly Shipyard in Pennsylvania,
Planting itself directly inside the American shipbuilding ecosystem. This is not outsourcing. This is an allied industrial partner offering capacity that the U.S. currently cannot generate fast enough on its own. In a Pacific conflict,
Getting a ship repaired in theater instead of transiting 6,000 miles back to an American port could mean the difference between having that asset available or not. Dry dock space is becoming a form of strategic power, and South Korea has a lot of it.
the newest piece of the puzzle is the KF-21 Bora-Mae, a 4.5 generation multi-role fighter developed by Korea Aerospace Industries. The aircraft completed its flight test program in January 2026, ahead of schedule, and the first 40 production units have been ordered for the South Korean Air Force. The Philippines has already requested deliveries between 2027 and 2029, and Indonesia, which co-developed the fighter, is expected to acquire its own fleet. The KF-21 is positioned as an affordable alternative to the F-35 for countries that want a modern, capable fighter without the political complexity and price tag that comes with American fifth-generation platforms. According to CPRI data, South Korea's share of global major arms exports grew from 0.9% in 2010 to 2014 to 2.2% in 2020 to 2024, placing it roughly 10th in the world. In 2010, more than 90% of Korean arms exports went to just 2 countries, Turkey and Indonesia. By 2024, the recipient list had expanded to 23 nations, with more than half of all exports going to Europe, and Poland alone accounting for 46%. Defense industry profits topped 3 trillion won, roughly $2.1 billion, for the first time in 2024, and Hanwha Group earned more from exports than from domestic sales for the first time in its history. Total defense export orders are projected to reach $24 billion in 2025. There is an irony buried in all of this. South Korea's defense rise began with abandonment. When America said it might leave, Korea decided it would never be caught unprepared again. 50 years of that determination, combined with one of the most disciplined manufacturing cultures on the planet, turned a country that could not build its own rifle into one that now arms NATO members, repairs U.S. Navy ships, and is about to export its own fighter jet. The real story is not any single weapon. It is about a country that got very good at building things and then applied that skill to defense at the exact moment the rest of the world realized it had forgotten how to manufacture its skull. The factories that build Samsung chips and Hyundai cars and LNG carriers run on the same habits as the factories that build tanks and howitzers and rockets. Process control, supply chain management, quality assurance, and relentless throughput. That is what South Korea actually exports. The weapons are just what it looks like when you put camouflage on an industrial powerhouse.
Thank you for watching. This has been History Lens. If you want more stories about how the world really works behind the headlines, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode.